The only question where I understand.
Well, I'll leave that to you to decide while I'm introducing you. This is a funny sort of day here because there are so many different things going on, and some colleagues are here now but have to go early, and some colleagues are somewhere else but they'll be coming in at some point. And I apologise, Joel, to you for this. It's not something that I was aware of beforehand. But anyway, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Joel Feinstein from the University of Nottingham. And you're our second external speaker this semester for the first time, because so far the How We Teach seminars have been led by people totally from the School of Mathematics here. So Joel is from the University of Nottingham, from the School of Mathematical Sciences.
That's right, yeah.
Right, and he is doing very exciting things with using computers in his teaching, and that's what you're going to talk about, isn't it?
I'm not quite ready to start because I've got some handouts in here which I was going to get out of this folder and give to people.
Give those to me, I'll have them
So let's see if I can load that, and then I have to get my Camtasia set up, which is not quite ready yet. So don't need that. Don't need the train times. So there are about 3 different things in here, I think.
Okay. And how many copies of each are there?
I've got about 10 of each with me, so it should just about suffice.
So 1, 2,
If I sit near this, is 2 examples later.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's class reading.
Testing.
We're sharing on this one.
Yes, unfortunately, our photocopy is going out in exactly one time. Okay, so I shall start my Camtasia recording at this point.
Are there any spares of this one anywhere? No?
Well, we have a.
Oh, you have one of those. Right, have you got one of those, Steph?
Yes.
Yes, we have those. Sorry,
He's got a little
so we have more if somebody still needs one.
Might be useful for me.
No, we're sharing on those.
Okay, I can start my Camtasia account then.
You need to tell us what Camtasia is.
I will, in due course. Okay, so I'm now recording as well, so we have everything in duplicate, except that what my Camtasia is doing is it's capturing everything that appears on my tablet screen with synchronized audio, assuming my microphone is working, which it looks like it is. So we'll have a record of what appears on that screen to go along with your video of me dancing around, waving my arms around. That way we'll be happy. Now, I've got a certain amount of time today, an hour and a half, but feel free to stop and ask me questions any time in the middle, and I'm sure all sorts of things will come up as we go. But I have already written quite a lot about my experiences, positive and negative, with all this stuff on my blog. So if you want to find out some of the pain I had to go through to get as far as I've got now, you can have fun reading all about it on my Explaining Maths blog. On the other hand, this page here, which of course, is just a normal web page. It's not a big font. But this is my screencast web page, which I've got on my blog. And the link to it is here. So just go to my blog and put a /screencast at the end. It's one of my static pages. And they're called static pages, and of course that means they change all the time. As I put more of my screencasts on the web that I think might be interesting to people outside the university, I sort of add a selection of them to that page. And then I've also added a feedback page where I'm putting feedback I'm getting from the students on my use of screencasts, which at the moment is unreasonably positive. More positive than it should be, as I will explain. Because none of them this year have yet come up with all the perfectly valid disadvantages that presenting by this means actually does have. It's not all good. So what am I going to try to do today? I'm going to try and give you a demonstration of what I do while telling you about what I do, which is probably self-referential, which means I'll probably get stuck in an infinite loop and you'll have to rescue me. So here you can see I'm using a tablet PC, but I haven't written anything on it yet, except for pre-prepared stuff. But what I'm running on this tablet PC is the standard software that comes with it, called Windows Journal. It's a bit different from smartboard software, so all these different software got their own quirks and advantages and disadvantages. I quite like some of the things you can do with Windows Journal, like push some stuff down if you want a bit more room, or move it around, or change its colour and things like that. You can do all sorts of fun things, but you don't want to waste all your time doing that. But in fact, of the sophisticated tools, the ones I use most often are pushing things around because I need more room, moving them around because I got too near the end of the line. I tend not to use the sophisticated tools available for drawing an approximate circle and then highlighting that and then telling it to change it into a circle, because I think that's there just to show how clever it is. But I'd much rather actually have a circle drawing tool, but that's not available in this software. Anyway, that's personal viewpoint on that. So, why do I want to use a tablet PC in classes? Well, for one thing, you quite often get a big data projector screen, and then your writing comes out really large, and it's really easy for them to see. I haven't got as big a data projector screen as I'm used to today, but you can see that if you scale that up, then as I write on the screen, it's going to go very large, very easy to read, even if people have got poor eyesight, and so on. That's a good start. I can switch colours whenever I want and make the colours exciting. I can do all sorts of sophisticated things that I usually don't do. But I do like to change colours just to grab their attention and start writing in red and screw around things. So I'll say a bit more about what I do in a moment. Actually, I'll tell you my main system is that I pre-prepare a skeleton of the material I want to talk about in a PDF file with gaps. And so then it says, here's some standard material which I'm not going to be writing today, and here's a gap which I'll be writing and you should fill in while we go. But of course, the disadvantage is that I'm going to, at the end of the lecture, save this all and put it all on the web, so they don't really have to write anything if they don't want to. I'm pleased to see, though, that they do like to write things. And this brings on to one of the disadvantages. It's very big, it's on one data projector screen, and there's a limit to what you can show at any one time. So people will say, can you go back to the last slide, please? And of course I can. I just go backwards and forwards as much as I like. But then the people who are still writing what's on the other screen are in trouble. So limitation to what you can show at any one time is, for me, the major drawback to this system. And there are various...
What medium would allow you to show all that at the same time?
So I'll tell you, there's two things that I know about. One thing I have done, used in the past, is when we've got dual data projectors, and some of our rooms have got dual data projectors, I would project the unannotated slides on one, and I would annotate the ones on the other, so that at least they can see the statement of the theorem on one screen while I'm proving the theorem on the other. Of course, I have given them as single-sided printed handouts the slides, so they've already got the printed slides already. So to some extent, the stuff that's already gone before, when it was on the printed material, they've already got it, and they can just, and I can say, well, if you look back at the statement of the theorem, then I can refer to it. But I'd much rather have it showing in front of them with any other annotations I've added at the time. So what can actually do that for them? There is a very expensive system called Thunder, which is a digital flip chart, which will cost you, set you back about £100,000, I think. And then you get 7 digital flip chart screens, and as you start writing on the next one, the others all shift over, and you can have 7 screens displaying at a time. And I'd love to have that showing off. Yeah. But that would definitely help. I would love to work with that system, except that it might be difficult to do the screencasting for that.
But you know, the problem that you've just highlighted is true whether you use PowerPoint or OHP or Blackboard.
That's right. The big advantage of Blackboard or Whiteboard, if you've got a big rolling Blackboard, a double rolling thing, you can have about 8 Blackboards worth showing at one time, certainly 6. And so sometimes there are advantages to the old systems. And that's the one thing I regret, not being able to have more showing at a time. As I say, it's not all good. Nobody has mentioned that this year. I got one bit of feedback. They said, on those rare occasions when I didn't manage to get something down in lectures, somebody said it was very good that I was going to be able to get hold of it after the lecture from the saved version or the screencast or whatever. So they've been very positive about it this year. But personally, I would rather I could have more showing at a time. Now I can change my view and have more showing at a time. And if your data projector screen is big enough, then I guess that will do. But it's really going to be very, very big to make that work properly. So I don't think I've really got a solution to that. Being able to change scale during lectures can be handy, though, if you want to just squeeze a little bit more on. So technical issues. About time you saw me writing something. So what have I mentioned? So there's not room for that much on one screen. Okay, what about other technical issues in using this tablet? Gosh, that's not coming out as blue as it has on my screen. I think we've got a slight colour issue with this display, which is going to be a bit of a shame. Let's see whether the red comes out as red. Oh, it's reddish. Okay, so I've got a large variety of colours, and I can change colours whenever I want. I can change the colours of what I've got. The back button is extremely useful. Or if I've gone back too far, I can forward again. One of the most useful tools on this, when something goes horribly wrong, the other one being, of course, the fact that you can erase nice whole pen strokes. Actually, I think I can use the back of the pen for that. Let's try that. There, so that's the demonstrating eraser. It's quite good, technically. But what are the technical issues? Well, you're completely dependent on all the equipment you're using, software and hardware, and all sorts of things can go wrong. Now, at the moment, I'm using this tablet to do the writing. I've got a wireless microphone feeding what I'm saying in through the mix socket to the laptop sound card. And the laptop is running Camtasia on top of everything, as well as Windows Journal. And Camtasia is doing a screen capture of everything that appears on the screen to make a movie, and recording the sounds to give you a synchronized Screencast. And the room for things to go wrong is absolutely huge. I'll be saying more about some of the things that have gone wrong with the other bits later on. But at the moment I'm just talking about using the tablet PC without all the screencasting, podcasting stuff. So
what's the Windows Journal bit? What does that do?
This is Windows Journal here. It's the stuff that works with the pin for digital writing.
Oh, so it's just the...
So this is this document is a Windows Journal note, and it's designed to work with the pen and what they call digital ink. And that's what I'm using at the moment to give this bit of the talk with.
Yeah, actually, thanks.
So this is Windows Journal, which works with Windows notes, Windows Journal notes, and when I'm giving my lectures and working with, as I say, pre-prepared PDF files, now I can't write directly on those with Windows Journal. But what I can do is I can print the PDF file to the Windows Journal note printer, and that produces the Windows Journal note, which has the PDF as a background. I can't push the PDF stuff around. That sits there as a permanent background, but with gaps in, which I can write in. And I can add extra pages if I need to. I'll show you adding an extra page in a minute. So...
When you say a page, this is on a page. You're on a page.
This is an A4 page portrait. I'm working portrait, but showing a page width. Everybody can choose their own favourite settings. So this is an A4 portrait page, believe it or not, showed at page width. And then the next page starts there. So when I was first started using this tablet, it would tend to crash and not do what I was expecting and give me a lot of trouble. There was a bit of a learning curve. Learning to use Windows Journal, it's got a nice tutorial, it takes about half an hour to learn how to use Windows Journal and do most of the things you want to do with it. And then you get into the lecture room and things start going wrong, and you've gone live and you just have to muddle your way through somehow. And then after a few lectures, you actually start to find out how to use it properly. And there's a bit of a pain barrier in using all this stuff. But when you get through it, it's okay. It affected my pace quite badly at the beginning because not only was I having trouble getting it to do what I wanted, but the software would crash, it would freeze. Sometimes I had to just quit and restart Windows Journal. Sometimes I had to reboot the whole laptop in the middle of the lecture and I'd lose time and so on. And I'm pleased to tell you that I found out now, and I believe the source of almost all my problems was, and I've only discovered it in the last few weeks, that if you run the tablet on mains power, it works much, much better than if you run it on battery power. And if you try doing anything challenging with it...
Yes, it's odd that, isn't it? I've experienced that, whereas if you use battery, certain things are not functioning at all.
The processor runs at different speeds, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So it'll run at a higher speed if you plug in the main.
It's absolutely crazy.
Well, it has to, when it's running a battery, it has to choose, is it going to try and preserve battery power, or is it going to try and run as fast as possible? And somewhere hidden in there, I'm told, now I've asked about it, are some settings where you can tell it. But in any case, if you need it for 2 hours on a Tuesday afternoon like I do, battery power would just cope with that on its lowest usage level, and then you've got no hope of getting the processing power. And I was getting the strangest bugs that I couldn't understand, and I couldn't reproduce them in the office, because there, of course, I was running on mains power. And eventually I twigged that I was doing something different in lectures than I was doing in the office, and I asked someone, I said, does it make any difference for running on battery power? They said, oh gosh, we never thought you'd be trying to run it in a lecture on battery power. What on earth are you doing that for? And that was the problem solved. Most of my problems solved in one fell swoop. If you look on my blog, you'll see that I had 5 weeks of paying first this year. And I never did realise that in previous years. So I've been using this tablet for about 3 years now. Yes?
What is your PC?
This is a Toshiba tablet laptop. I have used others, but this is, yes?
Was there a reason you were running it on battery power because the socket was hard to access?
I didn't want to keep, I was trying to keep my power cable plugged in my office and feeding through the usual thing at the back of the desk and so on, and it was a pain to keep taking it out, putting it in my laptop bag. So I've actually asked them to buy me an extra power cable this year, and they're buying me an extra cable so that I can keep one in place in my office and take one with me to lectures, which will probably save me from forgetting it, like I did the other day. I was so disappointed a few days ago when I had to give another lecture on battery power because I'd left the power cable in my office, which was very irritating. And all the old bugs came back, and some of the bugs were random straight lines being drawn between the last two places I visited on the screen with the tablet pen. I'd have to keep hitting the back button because suddenly there'd be a long diagonal line on the screen. It's okay, I got very used to clicking the back button. So that's all right, in code. And occasional crashes and freezes and so on, all a bit of a nuisance. Anyway, so technical issues then, reviewing the laptop, there were some, most of them were resolved. Most other issues resolved by using the tablet on mains power.
It isn't a mode that turns your handwriting into your best sort of copyplace, is it? Something I could do with. I mean, so I do find it difficult to write on these things. I mean, like, that is that much or mush. You know what I mean?
Well,
if you
which one?
Oh, not much.
Which one? The much there, not much room on the screen. Yeah. Not much on the screen. Well, I guess the students have to ask me if they can't read my handwriting. Yeah. But actually, handwriting recognition is quite good, except for maths. Right. And if it tries to recognise maths, it produces garbage. So I never do convert my handwriting. The students have to get used to my handwriting. So there is, but it's no good, you're saying? Yeah. I don't think... It's not sort of... It's quite good. I could highlight that and tell it to convert it to writing. But it's going to be such a fuss in the middle of a lecture, there's no way to do it. No, I'm just going to hope that
no, so
I'm writing on a big
put
screen.
It on the BLE or whatever afterwards.
But it's quite... Well, okay, no. They will hear me say it as well, because they'll get the screencast if they want to. Also, they'll probably get used to my handwriting after a while. Possibly. I don't get many comments on problems with my handwriting. Very few. Do you want to do?
What do you write on, Martin?
I just find it difficult writing on OHBs and things like that, where your hand isn't sort of particularly supported, yeah.
It's got nothing to do with it.
Okay, so that solves most of the technical issues. Then, as I say, what's my methodology at the moment? Actually, it varies. Sometimes I use LaTeX Beamer to produce PDF presentations, but then I back it up with also writing comments separately. So that's one of the things I do. And I'll show you one of those in a minute. Now, LaTeX Beamer doesn't seem to collaborate very well with being imported into Windows Journal. So I tend to swap between the Beamer presentation and a separate Windows Journal note for the comments.
Beamer produces PDFs though, right?
Yes.
Beamer produces so, but the PDFs don't work.
Well, first of all, the Beamer, the presentations produce several PDF pages per. The standard way of doing it. Okay, so then you incorporate that into your Windows Journal. It's several pages. You put your annotations on one page, and when you change the next screen, it disappears.
Right. Yeah.
That's one problem. And the other problem is, it's simply, when I exported it back to PDF, it seemed there's a bug. I import it in, I annotate it, I export it back to PDF, and there are spurious black bits and so on. Maybe that, I'll try it again from year to year and see whether the issues disappear, but at the moment, they just aren't collaborating very well, so maybe they're separate. a separate document for comments. Right. So then that's one when we're doing it. Then there's or I can use just seminar class. Seminar. To produce relatively boring slides, unannotated slides, as I call them. I spelled that right. Unannotated slides. Yes, that's all. And then with gaps. Then I do import that into Windows Journal and annotate them in Windows Journal.
So is seminar class another piece of software?
That's later. It's one of the document classes.
What about interfacing with ordinary Windows things like PowerPoint and Word?
PowerPoint and Word. Well,
I know from the maths side I'm just thinking the broader perspective.
okay, so I mean,
You're talking about interfacing with LaTeX.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a Windows Journal virtual printer. So if you've got a document that you think you might want to annotate, you can print it to Windows Journal, and it will look fairly close to the way it did in the first place. I've hit problems exporting PDF and getting it into Windows Journal. It does get a lot more bitmapping, but I found it helped if I went first through Adobe Distiller or Adobe Acrobat Pro to make better PDF files, and then go to Windows Journal. So it's a bit of a nuisance. Sometimes when you import it into Windows Journal, it doesn't look as good as it should, but it's not too bad. And so if you prepared a nice presentation in some other form and you think you want to annotate it using Windows Journal, just print it using the Windows Journal Note virtual printer.
So, Joel, you said that you prepare the outline and then you fill in the gaps in the lecture, but there are problems in writing mathematics. So what do you do when you want to write mathematics?
No, there aren't any problems writing mathematics.
Oh, I thought that was what you said.
There's a problem converting handwriting to mathematics.
If you've got handwritten mathematics and you want the computer to recognise it and turn it into beautiful typefaced ones,
oh, sorry.
That's right. It can recognise even my handwriting reasonably well, and it's very clever, and it will guess genuine words. It may not be the words I actually wrote, but it will guess genuine words. But when it's with mathematical symbols, it just converts them into random bits of nonsense. It hasn't got a clue.
There is a separate piece of software which will convert mathematics into proper mathematics.
Handwritten,
Yeah.
which software would you
I forgot what it's called at the moment, but it's a partner software to the one to do with the handwriting.
Okay. Right.
But it would only be convenient if you're using separate sort of equations of mathematics. If you're embedding mathematics within normal text, it wouldn't be as much use.
Also, it's not clever enough to know when you switch.
No.
So we can't just draw a dollar or something.
No.
Yeah.
Still, you can see that the technology is gradually improving, that there will come a time when you'll be able to highlight the stuff and say, this is maths, turn it into nice maths. It'll happen someday. We're not there yet. How about I show you a little bit of a screencast? So at this point, what I wanted to do with that. So let's have a look at a couple of screencasts. Of course, we won't see the whole thing. Why do we do proofs? And chapter 4. Or possibly probably I should do how we do this, because that's the one I've got the handout for. But I think I'll show you why we do this. Now what I have to do is, because at this point I'm going to pause my Camtasia recording, because there's no point recording this bit now, so I'll pause this one, but you can keep the other one running. Right. Now I don't know how it's going to come out on the screen. Let's have a look at why we do proofs.
So in a lecture, would you typically be using 2 computers and 2 screens?
No, I normally do everything on one screen because I wouldn't normally show them the screencast in a lecture.
Oh.
They can see the screencast afterwards of what I've recorded on their own computers later. So the reason I'm showing you this is because I want to show you what I made earlier. Now, let's get it full screen. I thought it was F11, apparently not. It is F11, but it just... Why isn't it going full screen? Is it because the other one's full screen? Oh well, let's try it again.
So this session is on why we do proofs. And let me just make this full screen for you. So we start by saying that there are 2 questions that may have occurred to you when it comes to proofs. Here are some of the ones that I've heard or come up with. Why do you have to do proofs at all? One reason, isn't everything either obviously true or obviously false? I'm going to show you some examples today which I hope will convince you that things are sometimes neither obviously true nor obviously false.
This is latex Beamer, by the way.
So
latex Beamer document.
A lot of people wonder why you should prove anything at all. I'm hoping to give you some motivation to that today. This is some motivation. How can you ever be absolutely sure whether something is true or false? Couldn't there be some special case you've missed? Well, if you've got a proof that you're absolutely sure covers every case, that's a pretty convincing way to help you be sure that something is really true. What about if something is intuitively obvious? You've got a pretty good idea what a continuous function is. What about this intermediate value theorem, that a continuous function can't jump over some value? If a continuous function defined as an interval takes a couple of values, it must take every value in between. Why should you have to prove a statement like that? Because it's intuitively obvious. You couldn't possibly miss anything out when you join the 2 points as well. Well, that's something to say about that. And there'll be more as we go through the module, mathematical analysis. Why are definitions important? Why do we need to know what our definitions are? We're going to see that if you don't know what your definitions are exactly, you haven't got much chance of figuring out what the right answer is. In fact, the answers usually depend on the definitions you're working with, and knowing roughly what something means is not going to be enough.
Now let me move on to somewhere where I'm doing something else. Okay, so we've got all the, I'm doing all this Beamer stuff, and you can scroll through, and you can, the nice thing about this, when it's a screencast or something like this, is you can, when you scroll back to the forward, you can actually find your place quite easily. This was a sort of unexpected benefit. In the past, when I've done just audio,
if you're going to try numbers, try not to make them too balanced.
Hey, thank you. Shush. When I just did audio podcasts, just audio recordings, and gave them the annotated slides to go with it, they used to say it wasn't that easy to find their place. I did my best to tell them, okay, these audio podcasts does this bit to this bit, and so on, and to make it as easy as possible. And another issue that came up with the audio was I discovered that quite a lot of the time in the lecture when I'm not saying anything at all, sometimes when I'm writing, I got hold of, I got this called by me, Adobe Audition, I think it was, That's the one I went for in the end. I tried various, and that's got Audition had a very nice pause removing possibility. And when I used that, well, okay, you do lose some of the quiet questions from the audience because it can't quite tone the difference between background noise and quiet questions from the audience. But it did quite a good job. Well, so I discovered that 30% of my lectures were pauses. So in fact, that also helped them because they said when they were listening to the audio, they didn't know how long they were going to have to wait before they were going to start speaking again. So they didn't dare fast forward because they might miss something. So when I did this pause stripping, well, you know, that's 30% of the 30% short of the lecture, and none of this waiting for the next thing. But this is even better because they can actually get to the bit they want very quickly because they can see me writing it. Right. So this is the Simpsons paradox. The hospitals that one of them is better at curing male patients than the other, and is better at curing female patients than the other, but the second hospital is better at curing its patients. So I asked the students to think about whether that's possible or not, and there's always someone who comes up with some numbers. Let's see what they came up with this time. So yes, so hospital A had one male patient and cured 2, and 3 female patients and cured 2 of them, whereas hospital B had 100 male patients and cured 99, and 2 female patients and cured 1. And so, as you can see, the percentages B got for the males and the females were worse, but overall for patients, hospital B has done an awful lot better than hospital A has. So, but then the ride on the question is which hospital would you rather go to, which in this particular case doesn't really have a satisfactory answer. But in some cases does, and I'll refer the students to the Wikipedia page for some rather more illuminating examples. And apparently kidney stone treatment is a very important case of this. Apparently there are 2 standard treatments for kidney stone patients, and one appears to be much better percentage-wise on effective, but it turns out that they tend to use the weaker treatment on the easier cases. And so the treatment that's actually weaker gets much better figures because they tend to use that on all the easy cases. And if you look at on the tough cases, they have to use the hard one, but even the hard one doesn't do that well. And so there's a lot of examples like that where there's a hidden variable you don't know about. And if you do know about it, then you actually find out why the figures are going the other way. So this why do we do proofs goes on and finishes with these 3 questions here. Are squares rectangles, are equilateral triangles isosceles, and which of the following numbers are prime, which has caused no end of trouble. But the idea is not to have a definitive answer, but to cause discussion and see whether people agree. And I just tried to establish how important definitions are, and how it's important to know which definitions you're working with. But this are equilateral triangles isosceles, when I made this screencast available and announced it on the Math EDU mailing list, a huge discussion broke out of a somewhat difficult nature, which I won't go into, but suffice it to say that professional mathematicians don't agree about the correct definition of triangle either. So if we don't agree, how do we expect our students to agree? In other words, how do we expect them to answer problem 5? So, and I don't. And is -3 prime? What do people think?
Oh, I read that up recently.
You wrote it up?
No, I read something about that.
In my screencast, I claim that the answer is yes and no. I claim that it's not a prime number, because the prime numbers mean 2, 3, 5, 7, and so on. But that it is a prime element of the ring of integers. And so, depending on your context, you might or might not declare -3 to be prime. Anyway, so that's...
Goes back to your bit at the beginning about making your definitions clear.
Yeah, well, of course, that's what it's for. each of the examples we looked at here was to address one of those questions I had at the beginning. Why are definitions important? Why do you have to prove intuitively obvious facts? That hospital's paradox, it's intuitively obvious that if you're better curing your men and better curing your women, then you should be better. But it isn't actually true. That's an intuitively obvious fact that's false. That, I think, they told me they were quite convinced by that. Like the ones I spoke to said that that was a very useful example because it showed them that things that looked intuitively obvious might be false, and therefore proofs might be important. So I thought that was a good one. Right, so that's the beamer with separate annotations style. Now let me show you a little bit of chapter 4. So we'll close. That's confusing. That's just a picture of a Windows screen. That's not a real one. I'll do that. Properties of open sets in R to the D. Here we are. Let's have a picture. Now you're going to do anything. Has it gone to sleep? That one seems to have frozen. Technology. If this doesn't work, I'll go to the YouTube version, if it's there. Let's try it once more. As usual, it's a computer, so it doesn't work the first time, you just try it again. If it doesn't work, then I'll just do one of the other ones. That's a shame. That's the one I wanted to do to show you, to demonstrate.
Okay, if we could have quiet, please. We're now ready to start chapter 4, where we move on. Having introduced the open sets, we're now going to look at some more interesting properties of the open sets, and we're going to look at closed sets as well. And it's very important that you know the difference between a closed set and a set which is not open.
Okay, so let's have a look at this lemma here, where I'm proving that if A is contained in B, then interior points of A are also interior points of B. Not a very difficult lemma.
So what we have to do is take a point in the interior of A and prove it's in the interior of B. So we let X be in the interior of A.
That's naughty of me, I should say suppose, because there might not be any.
And we have to prove that X is in the interior of B.
And I forgot my underlines. That's a typical problem. I should be underlining all my points in order to do.
Now this is rather easy because, well, I'll just draw you the picture first of all. This is an optional picture.
I always tell them they're optional diagrams.
Well, you've got your point X, and X is inside A, and A is inside B. But more than that, X is in the interior of A, so you can find a little ball round X, which is completely inside A. So that will be a little open ball centred on X, which will be inside A. Now this diagram is not proof, but it does tell you why this thing is going to be true. Since X is in the interior of A, I can now go back to writing the formal proof again. there is some small positive real number r, so that the whole radius little r centered on x is entirely contained in A, is a subset of A. But A is a subset of B, so the same rule works for B.
This is me inserting an extra page. If you try and insert extra space to the bottom of the page, it gives you an extra page.
So we also have the same ball is contained in B, and so of course that means X is in the interior of B. And that does it. Every interior point of A is also an interior point of B, just because A is a subset of B. That's dead easy.
Okay, that'll do that one.
So do any of your students get disgruntled if you... I know when I used to go to lectures and the lecturer would use more space than they kind of anticipated using, I used to get really hacked off. Do you get
I
comments?
printed single-sided, so they've got room on the back.
Ah, right.
Yes, no, I haven't had exactly that. But it seems I'm the only one who's had that request from my students. I've talked to other lecturers about this, and they say, no, they print their things double-sided. But I don't single-sided because I've had requests for extra space. So this way, unfortunately, it's not good for the trees, but it is good for the students. So I just move on a little bit so you can see how this works. Then you've got your gap. There's proof that U intersection B is open when U and B are opened. And so on. And I'm inserting all these extra pages, which they'll probably be writing on the back of their notes. And that'll do for that one. Okay, so that's a couple of screencasts. Yes?
Was that seminar document class that you were talking about?
That one was document class seminar, yes. And I found it. What did I find was a problem with? Yes, document class seminar had a problem with PDF LaTeX, which I had to find a solution to. And so, you know, it's LaTeX and with PDF LaTeX. LaTeX was absolutely fine with document class seminar. PDF LaTeX always squeezed everything in the top left-hand corner of the page. But I eventually found a fix for it, and I put that on my blog. Every time I hit a problem and solve it, I put the answer on my blog, in the hopes that this will help someone else. In this case, I found somebody else had solved it, but I still put it on my blog, because the easier it is for people to find the solution, the better, surely. Right, so that's thinking about screencasts. I think I could let's go back to my own Camtasia now. Testing. Yep. Still listening to you.
It's not recording yet.
It's not recording at the moment, but I'm about to press the resume button. I can see that, I can see in fact there that it's not recording.
Resume is not recording, was he just talking, excuse the word, gibberish at the minute? Yeah, it's nothing to do with the lecture, is it?
Right.
It's just testing that the sound is
Right.
functional.
That's right. But that is recording me.
Yeah.
So my Camtasia recording will be a beautiful, pristine record of what I wanted people to see. And the full video will show the gory details. However, what I haven't got recorded on Camtasia is the screencast I was showing you. So that's why I mentioned here, you have to go to the screencast page to actually see what I was showing you there. And I've missed out all our wonderful discussion. But in any case, this isn't very good at picking up your comments. So I think the video will do a better job of that. I don't know how the video gets on with...
So a little bit flickery, but that'll be fine.
All right, that's good. That's good. We're going to get everything.
Fingers crossed.
What did you say?
Well, I zoomed in during the Camtasia presentations, and of course, because I'm recording a TV screen, it's a little bit flickery, but you can read it fine.
Very good.
Okay, so let me go back to saying a bit more about what I've been doing. So I'm now going to resume. Now the resume doesn't give a countdown. I wish it did. When you press resume, it starts straight away.
If you in the background had changed something on the screen,
yes,
it would automatically just switch to the newer version presumably.
Yes, I mean, it's now, it starts again doing a screen capture of whatever is now showing on the screen.
Okay.
So you can have a horrible jump if you want. And sometimes what I do is I've added an extra hint in an examples class or something. So, I paused the recording to give, and we've gone round the examples class with the helpers to see how they get on with the question. I realise they're all stuck on the same point. I come back. I don't want to resume in order before writing the hint. That's much too much fuss. So I tend to write the hint just there and announce it to them without saying anything. Sometimes I'll resume and then pause again, but it's a bit of a hassle. So I don't care if when I restart it suddenly is showing a hint that wasn't there before, because I can always say, here's a hint I just put up on the board for you, or whatever. Board isn't quite right, is it? Screen, I suppose. Anyway, so although it wasn't shown on my Camtasia record, we've just been looking at why do we do proofs, and chapter 4, which doesn't have a question mark at the end. Why do we do proofs does? Which you can find from the screencast page of my blog. So, what are the pros? Well, the students give you rave reviews. They love having all the materials available afterwards. They love the fact they don't have to turn up to lectures. And they love most things about it. And every now and then someone says, but they wish there was a bit more on the screen at one time. So, who benefits directly, who you really want to benefit? Well, dyslexic students have said they really like it. So if you look on the University of Nottingham sort of interviews with dyslexics, you'll see them talking about the way I use data projector screen and how much that helped them.
What do they like?
How clear it was to see because it was so big. How it was much clearer than writing on a whiteboard or a blackboard. How they have a complete record afterwards to look back at if they need to, of exactly what was said. And other people, not just dyslexics, say if they wrote down something wrong, the fact that if they find something confusing that they've written down, the fact that they can go straight to the web and I've already put on what I said, and they don't have to waste time thinking about something that doesn't seem to make sense because they can find they just had a typo. Of course, perhaps they could talk to their friends about it. On the other hand, if it was my typo, there's a good chance that I would have put a red ring round it and said, when they look at the version on the web, there's a good chance I'll have put a red ring round and said, sorry, what I should have said was this. So that also works.
Oh, so once you have a record of the lecture, you can add bits into it?
Well, at the moment, it's still annotatable. When I have a quick look through it after the lecture. I'm not guaranteeing to spot everything, but if I spot anything outrageous and obvious, I'll put a red ring round it and say what I should have said there.
How does that help with you? I mean, I'm thinking
it doesn't help with the screencast. It doesn't help with the screencast. But the screencast stays as it was. But when I do the recap at the beginning of the next lecture, I'll show them that bit again and say, I spotted the typo last time. I mean, so they may have already found it when they checked my online notes. But when I do the recap next time, I normally get a chance to say, here's the recap. Oh, I had a typo here in case you didn't notice. This is what I should have said.
But screencasts are fixed in time, you can never edit them.
One can edit screencasts, but I really wouldn't want to get into it.
Okay.
The only time I do it is when I say something that I reckon I really wish I hadn't said.
I won't say it.
I won't say it now because otherwise I'll have said it again.
If you give this module 2 years in a row, what do you do?
Okay, this is my first year doing screencasts, but there's plenty of audio available from past years. So all the past year's materials are available on the web, and I've told them that, and there are clear links to it. And I'm trying to find out to what extent they want to use the past year's materials. Last year, I didn't do audio because I was having to give 2 lectures in the same, 2 modules in the same semester, and I did not have the time to do audio of everything and sort it all out.
So, well, let's say year 1 you've done an acceptable version of what you think you should be doing. What do you do in year 2? Do you just simply repeat all this stuff, or?
Okay, I've tried several different things with interesting results. In fact, if you look in this case study, you'll see some of the things I've tried. So what I did with my 3rd year module, and again, as I said, I hadn't been. This is my first year on screencasting, but let's talk about the audio. version. So I had a complete set of annotated slides and audio from my third year measurement integration module and from my fourth year functional analysis module. And I got them all on the web, and then next year I told the students, let's try something different this year. You've got a complete record of last year's lectures, which sort of they did, though perhaps not as good as screencasts. And then you look at that material in your own time. I'll tell you what you should look at by when. And when we meet, we'll discuss any problems you've got. And let's have our lectures, won't be lectures, they'll be tutorials, discussion classes. It didn't work very well for the third years. Maybe they got behind, half of them didn't turn up. The ones who did turn up didn't really have any questions. They may or may not have looked through the stuff in advance. So then I said, okay, we'll look at some questions from the question sheets. But then it turned out that the strong students had already done those questions, so they were wasting their time being there. So then what I found worked better, took me a little while to settle down on this, was to prepare separate worksheets for each class with some examples to look at based on what they should know. And introducing a bit more structure into it helped. And if I'm running it again, then I'll just produce a whole load of worksheets and do it that way. But I hesitate to do it because I got rave reviews again, not completely rave reviews. There were some people with some issues with it, but I got a lot of people saying that they really appreciated the fact that they were being able to learn in their own time. They could rewind me and pause me if I was going too fast, and so on. And so I got loads of positive reviews from students. But when it actually came to exam performance, their performances the third years were really terrible. So in theory they had an incredible amount of supporting materials available.
Are these comments coming back from the dyslexic students, do you know?
So you mean how many of them? So the only ones...
The positive feedback, is that coming from the dyslexic students or not?
Well,
do you happen to know? You may not know.
I don't know because they're anonymous mostly.
I mean,
So the dyslexic students are very happy with it. The overseas students are very happy with having the audio recordings available because they can go back and listen.
One of the major problems with dyslexia is audio processing.
Right. So
that's going to be an issue anyway with audio recordings.
Doesn't seem like they'll abide about their experience, though, does it?
I mean, they have got both, but there's also some evidence now to suggest that the more information you provide in terms of the different media, the more confused that they become.
Interesting.
So,
well, the one who went and got an interview.
Conflicting inputs in terms of visual processing, in terms of audio information that has to be processed. And with dyslexia, that processing can be an issue. So conflicting media to be processed can cause extreme difficulties. So that's starting to become, as more of these type of inputs become available, that is becoming an issue.
Okay, but suppose you got an audio podcast and you're listening to the audio and you didn't get a bit. So you rewind it and listen again.
I know that a lot of students get, audio players, recorders for lectures as part of the DSAs.
Yeah.
I mean, that just, in some ways, that can add to the problem because they get hours and hours of stuff, just audio recordings, and the evidence seems to be that they don't actually play a lot of it back. It's just too time consuming and difficult, although they can bookmark it, it's still quite difficult to do that. And to tie up the recordings with the other information. And time management is particularly an issue for them, and organisational skills.
I'm finally an undergraduate for whom that isn't an issue. I'd be delighted. I'm not saying it's not important and extra hard, but it's
compared to their peers.
But Claire, having the mathematics with sound and picture is the same as being in lecture?
The visual is particularly good, the effect of that.
Yeah, so
the screencast is probably better because they can find the point they want and listen to that, and they could listen to it again if they want, and there won't be such trouble. The only thing that I've had very little feedback that sort of fits with what you just said, except for those who said it was a bit difficult finding the right place, which I've addressed in various different ways, but the screencast seemed to do the best job of being able to get the audio and the visual matched up. So the other efforts I've made to help them match up the audio with the video have been to clearly label which bits are in which audio. So these slides are covered in this audio podcast and so on. And also stripping out the pauses helps because it makes the whole audio thing shorter. So cutting out 30% of the length actually does help them find their way through it and not have problems with the fast forwarding issue. I think
the gaps that you have in a live lecture are sort of natural.
Yes, they
They're
are.
not at all natural in a recording.
No.
You know, they're false. There's too many gaps. They're too long while you're writing, all sorts of things. So when I do this kind of thing, I make a separate audio recording, which is tied in more closely to the page that I've presented.
Right.
So do you speak it later?
I speak it later. I don't do it live. I did do it live, but I found these long gaps, which you don't notice when you're stood there. And
have you ever
students find it more natural anyway, because they're looking around the room, they're doing all sorts of things.
Have you tried any of this automatic pause stripping software?
No, I haven't.
As I say, it's surprisingly effective. The only thing annoying is you lose the student questions, but you can't normally hear those anyway in the recording. You have to repeat them anyway.
I try to do the minimum amount of work I have to do. So I record these lectures once and that's it. It's not good enough to students.
I found it rather nice. I got this thing set up to batch process. So if I had a whole load of audio recordings, I could just say, okay, pause strip them all. So finding your place seemed to be one of the big issues, and that seems to be resolved with this screencasting, because when you scroll through the screencast at the bottom and the writing all appears, you immediately get to the place you want to want. You quickly get to the place you're actually interested in. And I think that's why I think I like the screencast better. But it makes it even less likely the students are actually going to come to the lectures. And you have to come to a decision on whether you want to force the students to come to lectures. Do you want to say, if you don't come to lectures, you will miss something that you can't get otherwise? And then those people who are ill will miss it. And those people who have a job interview will miss it. And tough. Or do you say, no, I'm going to make everything available, and what I really care about is whether they're going to learn. And if they learn it, whether they come or not. In which case, the people who are lazy and think they can put everything off will never learn it, and they'll try and learn it all the night before the exam. And you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. I don't think there's a universal solution. I've gone for the make all the material available, and the people who really want to learn it really appreciate it, and the people who don't really want to learn it, maybe they'll never learn it.
Well, I guess they appreciate it too, right? Because then they've got the sort of, oh, it's all right, it'll be all right.
Yeah, they appreciate it.
Why are you giving the lectures? Why are you giving the lectures? Why not just put it all on there and let them do that?
Why do I want to give it next year?
No.
Why do you give a lecture at all?
Why are you giving any lectures?
Well, first of all, I want to interact with the students who are there. So I will ask them questions and try and find out and get them thinking about things and get feedback from them. And I'll try to interact with the students who are there. So the people who aren't at the lecture, yes, they can't do that. And if they've got a question, they should be able to ask me straight away. And they can, though it tends to be, what is that funny squiggly word out there that we can't quite read?
So there is a definite disadvantage not to come to the lecture, isn't there?
Yes, there is a disadvantage, but it's not enough of a disadvantage to put off the people who are feeling a bit lazy at the moment. The other thing is that I get a buzz out of giving a lecture in front of people, which I don't get when I'm trying to record it on my own in a room. And I just don't think I would sound as excited if I'm explaining it to a non-audience as I am when I'm explaining it to an audience. So I much prefer recording what happens when I'm in front of an audience, which is exactly the opposite of what some of my colleagues feel.
But is student attainment better or worse? Because if everybody's happy, but then they're all failing, or a greater percentage of, what's the point?
What's the point? Well, because the students who really want to learn do get a lot out of it.
Yeah, but as a university, you're sort of hidebound by progression rates and things, so are more students sort of reaching the required, you know.
Well, I found that it seemed to work better for the second years. It's working very well for the second years. So, you know, I'm getting all the right sort of percentages on the marks in the second years. And
was it also for courses? I mean, more mature students you perhaps use it with, others you don't, and so on. Like.
well,
More
so
mature.
so I found the second year students it worked well for. The third year students it worked less well, and the fourth year students it worked well again. And I don't think we've settled down on the final thing. So I'm finding out what works well and what doesn't for different levels of students, and I'm still experimenting as I go.
Yeah. Well, you're doing measure theory or whatever, and Jimmy next door is doing fluid dynamics
Yeah.
and so on. I mean, generally speaking, in cohorts, you know, you look at them at program boards and they do similarly. But if there's a big black hole in one module and everybody's failing, then people say, well, why are you doing it like that, don't they? So.
Yeah, but there was a problem with measured integration anyway, because the students have always found that module hard. And in fact, the year I was giving it, you know, a typical, when I first went to Nottingham, there were about 7 students doing measured integration. To some extent, I'm a bit of a victim of the popularity of these second year modules because they really like this. And then they come to my third year modules and they think I'm going to give them this much help. But in the third year modules, on analysis, I'm expecting them to be a bit more mature, and perhaps they aren't. Perhaps because I've given them too much help in the second year. And so I say, right, I warn them off. I say, look, this module is not like second year mathematical analysis. It's much more abstract. You're going to have to do much more individual thinking. And they don't believe me. And then I end up with this class full of 35 students doing measured integration. And perhaps they shouldn't all be there. And that's going to affect my figures anyway. So I think that I sometimes end up with more students in my third year classes than should be there, possibly.
To answer Barbara's question about whether you should give a lecture at all when you have this system, I find it frees you up to give a better lecture, actually. Knowing that this stuff is prepared and there you can go a little bit faster on some subjects than others, you can go off at a tangent, knowing that the stuff they have to cover is actually on the web or wherever you store this stuff. So I find it frees me up to give what I consider to be a better lecture. It's less stressful.
So, when you give your really good lecture but you don't cover everything that you'd like to have covered, do you then expect that the students will go away and work with that as well as being at the lecture?
I don't expect them to go away and work with this. I expect them, in fact, to look at the material before they come to my lecture, prepare properly, and then to use this material in a sort of revision type.
You see, it seems to me that the students who do bother to go to the lecture shouldn't be expected as well to go through all of this, because that's giving them double work, isn't it? I mean, I can see that this stuff is very useful for those who don't go to the lecture.
I don't think it's giving them double work, it's giving them a second opportunity to learn the material.
Okay.
Well, as I say, I mean, what I was trying to do with the third years and fourth years, and it was a one-year experiment that didn't work perfectly, but where if I do it again, I've at least got some more information now, and I'll use my worksheets more often. The idea was not to do the same thing with lectures as they had already available, but to ask them to, you know, if I did this, if I do this for my third and fourth year module or something, then what I could do the next year again is I could say, okay, the lecture's there, and then come along and we'll have these discussion sessions and some worksheets, and that's something I may well try and get in the future. But I think I'll try it with screencasts backup instead of audio backup next time, because of all the fact that it wasn't a total success last time. But should we be completely dominated by the exam results?
No, but we want the little beggars to learn, though, don't we?
Oh yes, we want them to learn.
So if less of them learn, I mean, I use this, so I'm not, you know. So from a university point of view, you have to sort of evaluate them and see.
So Martin, you use this system?
No. I mean, I use sort of technology in lectures. I've not used tablet.
But you have
to. Joe has, yeah.
But as I say, over the last year or two, I've prepared all my modules, so I don't use it anymore, because I prefer overhead projector, because you can have 2 of those, and you can wander around and.
What do you put? Just slides on your overhead projector?
I don't know. I don't put slides. I just
I mean,
teach the subject sort of thing. Just like a normal lecture, as if I'd never seen technology before. It's just, this material to me is a backup. It's quite a good backup. You know, students do like it, absolutely, it's very popular. And you're treating students like adults, you know, you're giving them information because it's there. Why restrict them as far as the information is concerned? I would have loved this approach when I was a student.
But do your students turn up to your lecture?
In no greater or less numbers than previous, I would have said.
So what percentage do you think?
About 60% now.
For those of you who don't know, could I just say that we have two of our third year students here, Nick and Hayley, and they're here because they're doing a third year project with me, looking at lectures and what lectures contribute to students' learning and characteristics of lectures and so on. So if you want an opinion on what is good for students, you could get one over here.
Yeah, I think Joe's way of teaching is just as useful as using tablet PCs, because it's a different way of using the OHPs, but I think it's just as good. Because I remember when we did calculus, I think it was just that using OHPs, there was no issue of, like, if you're copied down one slide, there was no issue that you had to go back. So it was really rare to ask you to go back a slide, to go back and to change the OHP. So I think it's just as good.
Yeah. That's right. No, that's the two lectures you can have more showing at any given time, and that's very useful. Yes.
I also think from what Barbara was saying about having the screencasts online, I think that is a very good idea. Not so much that you're going to watch the lecture again, but say you said if you miss things, or if it comes to revision and say lecture 2, there was something that you wrote down but you can't quite remember all the bits, and lecturers say a lot of things that aren't written down, and you don't have time to write them down. So Screencast is very good for that.
Yeah, I mean, one of our lecturers does just put podcasts on the audio podcast. Yeah. It's not obviously, it won't be as good as the Screencast, but I don't know if lecturers believe that all the students are taking everything they say, because it's not true, because it may be that people are concentrating, but we could take in about 95%, but there's always a bit where you just one or two students just turn off, even if it's just for like 10 seconds, they might miss something. And I've noticed that because I've been to a lecture and I've listened to the audio of that same lecture, and I've learned so much more. So I think even the best of students, I think, will benefit from it.
Yes, so in the comments I've been getting on my comments here, I could show you some of these comments if you like. I'm going to be out and bigger. Now, how am I going to make this bigger?
You could read it out.
Just go to text size. Is that large enough?
Yes.
So what I want to do is screencasting feedback. Right, so the first one here, notes are clear, everything's gone through step by step, screen and podcast very clear. We can stay awake and concentrate by writing in the gaps and like that. They think they've got to balance it out right, or that person does. Sometimes impossible to attend a lecture. They never tell me why they can't attend the lectures. People have in the past said, because we've got job interviews, or we were ill, or something like that. But quite often they say, for some reason or other, we didn't attend a lecture. But then it's very useful. And if you didn't understand something the first time round, to be able to look at the notes and hear the explanation again, because the additional explanation often has more in than they took in at the time. So they really like the fill in the gaps PC tablet combination, and very valuable for missed lectures, screencasting. Tablet PC is a lot clearer to see than writing on the whiteboard, and again a lot more useful because they go online. So on, let's see. Annotated slides are useful for missed lecture or to check if the notes were copied correctly.
Where was this feedback written?
gave them, I emailed them a request for feedback, and I made a link available to an anonymous online feedback page. That I said, you can either use this anonymous feedback page, or you can email me directly if you want to. I got 3 email comments directly and 7 comments on the anonymous page. And here are the 10 comments. No, maybe they don't believe, maybe the people who have got something negative to say don't believe that the online form is as anonymous as I said it is, and are not risking to give me the negatives. But they haven't given me any negatives yet, in spite of the fact that I know there are some. So it's, yeah. Screencasts are very useful, because simply copying this notes isn't always useful without the explanation of the lecture. I find lectures presented using a tablet are much easier to follow. Able to hear the audio while looking at the slides makes it so much better than just some online notes. So, as I said, another set of rave review. Let's see how they get on with the exam.
So, Joel, we're running up to 3:30.
It does sound like we should probably put a stop to it, unless you want to see a little bit of another screencast.
Well, could we just ask people if there are questions? I know people have been chipping in all the way through, but are there particular comments or questions that people would like to make that they haven't done so already?
I've kind of got a general comment. I know me and my peers, when we found out material that was presented in the lectures was available before the lecture, we wouldn't go.
You wouldn't go?
Never. Yeah.
Right.
And I don't know how common that is now, whether because people are paying more in tuition fees, they feel like they should show up to more stuff. But as soon as we found out that the same wasn't shown, inevitably we wouldn't go. Now, I personally would probably have a look at it because I knew it was available anyway. But I know plenty of people that didn't actually bother with anything until like coming up to the exam, and they think they could do the entire module in like a week before the exam. Now, I don't know how common that is. I know amongst my peers it was quite common. I'm just wondering, do you two find that's still what people do? I don't know.
I think first year it was, but then I think sort of as you get into second and third year, it's a lot more. You like the contact time. You like having someone there that you can ask things to, and if you come across problems, you can address them there and then. Because the problem is, as Barbara was saying about why give lectures at all, it gives you that contact time. It gives you a chance to discuss any problems you've got or things like that. So.
I mean, the particular lecture that we have that's put lots of stuff on the Learn server, like audio and stuff like that, he's actually got the best attendance record.
Right.
That I think he's ever had. He said it was certainly in the last few years. So I thought that's just proof, isn't it, that it's not really having that much of an effect.
Well,
obviously, if you miss a lecture for like a genuine reason, it's so easy to catch up on it. And but yeah, he's got like a really good attendance record this year, so I think that's really good.
It's good. It's positive. I mean, I always vowed to myself, thinking, well, if I ever do this, I'm never going to put the notes online until afterwards, because I don't want to have this happen when I do it. But the more I hear from other people, I think we were just a bit more lazy than everyone else.
But what do you mean by put the notes on afterwards?
Oh, well, like a week after or something after it's presented.
When did you put yours up?
The same day or the day after.
Yeah, that will be after you've given it. Though.
Yes.
That's what you
Well,
would
but
rather before.
I can't put the screencast done before I give them the lecture.
Yeah.
I mean, I can do it your way.
Yes.
You go in year 2.
Yeah, oh yeah, the second, I can...
You could in year 1 actually.
Yes, I can give them the previous year's materials. And as I said, there are various things you can do with that. You can actually teach it a different way the next time, or you can teach it the same way again, and let them have access to previous year's materials as well. And I'm undecided what I'm going to do next year, but the second year I'm almost certainly simply going to do it again. Not say, here's last year's materials, use that. I'll say, next year I'm going to say, here's last year's material, it's available, and I'm going to make all of this year's material available as well. And it might be slightly different.
What's available before? What is available before?
What is available at the moment, or what will be available next year?
You mean before the lecture?
At the moment they've got annotated slides from the last 3 years. They've got 3 years worth of annotated slides. They can look at those if they want to. It's on separate pages called past lecture notes, available if they want it. And it's got audio from 2 years worth, I think, available if they want it, labelled as to when the audio was from. Actually, I think
how is that better than going to the library and looking at a few textbooks?
Good.
Oh, you have to sift through information then.
Yeah. Going to the library and looking at textbooks is really wonderful. Hardly any students do it. Do you go to the library and look at textbooks?
Not until this year.
Textbooks aren't focused enough. They're not, you know, succinct enough.
They have a lot of
bases. You know,
the textbooks have got a lot more in than they need to know to do well in the exam.
Yes.
So it's not an efficient way to do it.
And they're not written normally by the person who's setting the exam. And somehow psychologically, if you're reading the person's work who's going to be setting the exam, you somehow feel that you're going to do better. I doubt you would, but it feels like it, right? Yeah.
When I did some teaching in America, in the States, there was a set text, and the students were expected to read these chapters in the set text, and the lecturer was not a lecturer, they were a facilitator. And the lecturer said, well, I'll explain some of this stuff to you, and we can talk about some of this stuff. It's your job to actually read and understand these chapters, but I'll tell you about some, I tell them sort of my take on some of the bits from that chapter, the important bits I thought. But it was their job to really read the chapter and understand it. That's a very mature approach. And this wasn't even for honours maths majors. This wasn't maths majors, this was for others. And they were still, most of them, working really hard, handing in all the work. It was an amazing thing to see. This was Loughborough University, so they were probably paying quite a lot to be there and taking it very seriously. But I was very impressed, and I quite like that system. But that isn't the system the students are used to in Nottingham. And to introduce it, you have to introduce it from day one. It was, you're going to be mature here. Here's the book. Your job is to understand this chapter. My job is to explain what I think the important bits from that chapter, from my point of view, are, but you're supposed to learn it all, even if I don't cover it. How would you feel with that?
I'll hate it.
I don't know whether that's something that's bred into you from school, because I know at A level we weren't ever encouraged, really.
Yeah, there's no primary reading at A level school.
I think it's a really good way of doing things, but that it doesn't currently fit the culture, and that you can't suddenly introduce it in one lone module in year 2, because you'll be an outlier and everyone will hate it.
But I mean, Jill, that wasn't my question.
Oh, sorry.
You were talking about having the past 3 years' notes available if students wanted to access them.
Yes.
And it seems to me that, okay, the current year and perhaps last year makes sense together, but as soon as you start to have several years back, it's a bit like having the books in the library.
Yes, I'm not saying, I suspect that they don't actually look at those on the few things like that. And I might even get rid of them. I mean, it's just, it's no more effort. It's probably less effort to keep them than to get rid of them. From your point of view, you mentioned there's too much information.
I'm just thinking for any single lecture that you give, there are 3 years of back stuff available, plus the current year.
Yes.
So that makes 4 different sets of materials.
Yes, but I mean...
They might be slightly different.
But they'd have to go to another page to find it.
4 different sets of material for every single lecture.
Yes, but why would they go and look at the past one?
That's a huge amount for students to accommodate.
But I don't ask them to look at the past ones. It's only available for interest for anybody who wants to have a look and see what minors are different.
Some students may feel that in order to do fully what they perhaps feel they should do, that they should go through all this extra material. And if you apply that across the whole module and to all their other modules in their course, that is a lot of extra work.
Yes, but they sort of couldn't possibly do that because they don't have the number of hours.
But there are those students who would try and do that.
Would they? You think they'll go to the? Do you think they'll try to go to? They'll go to my past lecture notes page and have a look at last year's material and then the year before's material and look at it all?
Were you thinking particularly of dyslexic students there? or just students generally?
Well, it would certainly apply to the students I see who are dyslexic, but I think it may well apply to a lot of other students too.
Because some of them are feeling kind of vulnerable in their learning skills, I was seeing those as the ones most likely to kind of try this and this and this, because of that sense of recognition that they've got to work harder at learning.
Presumably there's a lot of overlap between various years.
Yes, it's almost identical.
Yeah.
So they'll get very bored if they look at last year's notes and the previous year's notes and notes before that, because it's almost identical. And in fact, in this same set of feedback, I asked also for feedback on, do you use past year's materials? Because I thought that was interesting to know. The common seems to be, we haven't yet, but it's useful to have it available. That's the only feedback I've got on that.
I find my experience is that although all this stuff I make available to students from day one of the semester, it's all there if they want it. They only access it seriously before in-class tests and before exams. And then the numbers absolutely shoot it, you know, they make a lot of use of it. Whether a lot of it's going in, who knows?
So I'm going to officially bring this to an end because our time has run out, but of course if people still have questions and Joel's willing to answer them, it's still possible to ask. So thank you very much, Joel, for giving us a really super presentation.